So you can see the diversity amongst the players here. Obviously, Tom's here as not only an entrepreneur in his own business, but also understanding the marketability of hiring people and how that changes. And I know he's got a lot to add in that area once we get to those questions. So my first question is, based on the structure of your company, have you always had an owner compensation policy in place? And if not, what was the triggering event that caused you to decide it's time, we need a compensation policy? And we're going to start with Pete.
It was
before and after.
Yeah.
He's got a before and after, right?
It was a little before my time, but it used to be, I heard some feedback already, it used to be just, for my grandfather and my great-grandfather, I think it was much smaller, easier to manage, and they just kind of wung it. And then as we had, as we were growing, we had more family involved in the business and unique situations that came out of that, we've kind of tweaked how the compensation program would look from generation to generation. So it's gone from extremely loose to much more structured over time because of how to keep the business healthy, how to handle succession issues, and how to deal with the family dynamic involved in it.
And now in the post-op into this, where you're a key employee, they have some pretty, they've got structure with respect to their policies for key employees like yourself.
Yeah, it's much different now. So we've learned a lot. We've learned a lot in terms of how to structure compensation programs for key employees that benefit the ownership side as well as the business side. So, like for example, right now we have 3 components of compensation for key employees. One is your base salary, which is driven on market pay. The second portion of it is some sort of a bonus related to an area that you can control. Did you produce or not produce? And then the third is the ability to share in profitability of the company. So in order to get the third component, you have to be an owner in the company. In order to be an owner in the company, you have to physically buy shares of the company. So it's a little bit different now, but it's much looser when our family was involved in it.
Sure. Jay, how about you?
Well, I wish I could say we're as sophisticated as Pete, but I guess our experience was the 3 of us coming in sales. We pretty much, my dad ingrained in us that if you're going to get more money, you have to sell more. So that's how we started out, salary and commission, and then as our roles expanded in the business, and as you guys know, you have to wear a lot of hats. We just, I took over more of the administrative duties. Keith and Scott were still selling, and then it becomes, how do you really figure out who's bringing value and what have you? When for sales, it's easy. The numbers are there, and and you can justify based on your sales. But when you have to branch off into other areas, it becomes more complicated. So basically, we started out pooling our commissions. And then gradually, when John came into business, we just decided to pay everybody equally. And so that's worked out pretty well for us. I'm not saying, it works for everybody, but it has worked for us. And so that's basically...
And the structure of your company, you're an S Corp, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so there's compensation, obviously, to ownership, but in an S Corporation, there's opportunities for profit distributions as well that come out to the individuals on a single tax basis. So, Tom, how about you?
Being the sole owner, I come in from a different perspective.
Yep.
But when I started the company and still continue to this day, I set it up similarly as you would if there were partners or multiple family members. So I believe that owners' and we're an S Corp as well.
Great.
So I believe
Thank
that
you.
owners' compensations are distributions, and they're done at the end of the year if there's profits in the company to be taken, and all employees are based on what that role should be paid. And I've always paid myself at what I thought was a fair CEO level salary in starting the company. So for the first couple of years, that was 0. And as we went along and my salary grew and as the company did and as my importance to the company grew. And both on risks we did and different challenges. And I had a board of advisors and not a board of directors, a board of advisors that I use to brainstorm ideas off of. But I always based my ownership, I always think of myself as two hats. One is the CEO and one is the owner. And the owner doesn't get paid unless the company makes money at the end of the year.
Thank you. Alan?
So we've had a couple of iterations as well. When my dad was running the company and had kids in the business, it was the dangle, right? Every once in a while, he would dangle something in front of you and make a distribution or bonus us at the time because we weren't owners. When I took over, it was a question of managing cash flow without a model, which is really difficult, and I didn't realize how dangerous it could be. And then in 2008, 2009, we got to where we are today, which is building a model. I have a 3-year perspective cash flow model that I use, and we actually have a formula for distributions, and salary is similar to the way Tom described running his company. Everyone gets paid based on their role in the company. Now, it happens that my brothers and I, after we assigned salaries to each other, got together and decided to add them up and divide by 3. But that was our choice. I mean, and the number wasn't that we were all going to get paid X. It was, I'm going to get paid this, you're going to get paid this, you're going to get paid this. Everyone agreed. Separately, we got together and decided we're going to add them up and divide by 3. But that's just because there's an extreme amount of trust amongst us. And to get to the point that one might be selling, one might be doing more administration work, but we were all confident that we were all going to pull on the rope as hard as we could. And so there's just an enormous amount of trust. But then distributions we actually do them quarterly. They're based on operating profit, and we have a formula that kicks in, a very specific formula every quarter. And so there's no subjectivity to it at all.
Great. So in part, there's been a little bit of philosophy shared about how they do what they do with respect to their compensation and the triggering events, potentially, buying out your father and knowing that all of your brothers are in the business, yours starting out and nobody gets paid unless there's profits and I'm going to get paid. Pete, really interesting the before and after where it was pretty loose and then got pretty tight and now it's kind of exponentially structured. And Alan, you got formulaically involved, pretty early on in getting that rolled out. So with respect to the philosophy, do we have an all-in philosophy? Do we have let's pay for lifestyles philosophy? There's lots of philosophies out there. Return on investment, market-driven. We've heard market-driven shared already. Responsibility-driven, job descriptions, or lifestyle-driven. I guess from a philosophy approach, what is your philosophy? Jay, you want to start?
Well, that's an interesting question. Basically, our philosophy is, I think I could speak for my brothers. It really, because when you're talking about our pay years ago when we were building the business with my dad, there wasn't a lot of money to throw around. So basically, we were below market. We probably didn't get paid what we should. However, my dad was gifting stock, and so that helped our situation in that it was kind of a de facto buyout. But that stopped before he went below 50%, so that definitely triggered some conversations, and we really had to accelerate the transition. But my basic philosophy is, it's not about, I enjoy what I do. I enjoy working with my brothers. It's a nice lifestyle. I like, controlling my own destiny. So I want to make sure our first primary focus is to make sure the business is healthy. And the way I look at it, if the business is healthy, we'll do okay. And fortunately, that's the way it is. But it isn't like we're there to, promote a lifestyle. If that was the case, we don't really live high off the hog. But we enjoy the business and building the business.
Great. Alan?
Out of all the terms you used, I don't think any of them fit as well as success-driven for us. Sort of everything we do is predicated on success. I don't think our salaries are extravagant at all. They're, in fact, our salaries aren't the largest in the company, not even close. But at the end of a quarter, it's nice to know that if we made money, that the owners of the business, and we do have some outside shareholders, but the family owns about 88% of the company. It's nice to know that we're going to get the benefits of that. So everyone's sort of pulling on the rope in the same way. We know we're going to make some money doing a job, but if we are successful and build the company, build success, then those quarterly distributions start to get larger and larger as we go.
Sure.
And so I guess I would characterize it as success-driven as opposed to market-driven or some of these other terms.
Great. And Tom, you kind of got obviously your own people, and then the people you're advising to, your clients, and the philosophies that they have.
Yeah, I'm a very big opponent of success-driven compensation for family members. I think it sets up anima. You talk about employees gossiping about what's going on. There's no bigger gossip within a company than lifestyle compensation, especially for multiple generations below. I think it creates a lot of issues. As I said to one of my clients, he said, I've got to give my kid enough to survive. I said, then why don't you give them enough to survive and not have the company give them enough to survive? Because no one knows what you're writing out and what your credit card bill is, but they do know what the payroll department and the accounting department is putting on there. And if you really want to make, well, no, he should have he should have a sense of fulfillment. I said, then make him earn it. And I feel that way in my own company. And, as I think about the potential of my kids who are much younger in the spectrum of where they'll go and what they'll do, those are things that come into my place a lot. So I'm a firm believer of if it's a true family, and the point of the family is that you're all, as you said, Alan, pulling the rope in the same direction, then why wouldn't you want to be compensated for the role in which you're in? And also, I think you lessen the respect that siblings or multiple generation or cousins have for one another if they don't respect the work that somebody's doing who's doing more. It might not be in the CEO role. Like you said, maybe it's somebody, when you get to be a certain size, it's someone who's doing mergers and acquisitions for your company. They're working more than anybody else, and they should be compensated based on closing deals. So I think there's a lot of different ways to look at it, but I think lifestyle is, in my own opinion, is the worst way to go.
But do you see it?
All the time.
Okay. Exclamation point. Right? Some of my clients, I keep telling them the same thing. We're not paying for lifestyles here. We're paying for performance.
Well, real quickly,
Yeah,
the
sure.
ironic thing is most of my clients that have done this and they have kids who are in their 20s were the ones that were very against all the kids getting trophies when they were playing basketball and baseball when they were kids. But now that they're on the payroll, they just want to dole out the money.
Yeah,
So it's funny how things shift.
sure. Pete.
I am pretty blessed because the core leaders, like my grandfather and my dad, both have very similar philosophies. So they kind of passed to me, and you don't really understand it growing up, but like even in my house, everything was driven around taking care of the business because it takes care of our family. So they created cultures in our home and at work that they were going to take as little as they could out of the company because we needed cash. They're very, very aggressive, especially my dad with growth, because he felt growth, and me as well in my generation, growth brings diversity and it brings stability to our business. But in order to grow, we needed cash for inventory, receivables in our business. So they took out as very little as they could, trying to diversify and create opportunities for future generations. So it's very, very market-driven. The expectation was you had to be not only market, but we expect you to be higher in ability than if we went out and interviewed. But I think our case is probably a little bit extreme. I've seen both sides of it. My dad had a real rough situation with his brother being involved in the business with a side deal in terms of lifestyle compensation. And it can destroy families, as I'm sure people in the room have seen that. But I think that's been our take on it, and I believe it 100%, and it works really well. So,
The next question I have is the process that everyone has used to develop their compensation policy. I mean, Jay's already shared that at the time of your youngest brother coming in, you kind of decided we're gonna make it an even playing field. Pete's already shared that how the structure, loose structure, had a structure, now even more structure. I'm going to end with Alan on this because he's got a computation itself. But Tom, one of the things that you shared with me when we chatted earlier this week was when it was time for you to start figuring out how to hire the people you needed for your company, what did you do?
I think there's two things that I did. Number one, and it helps that I'm in the recruiting business, but I interviewed a ton of people. And I continually do that internally from the standpoint of you have to have comparisons to benchmark against. And if you're looking to hire an accountant for the first time or a controller, and you only meet the guy that your CPA firm referred to you, then you might love him, and you might think that X dollars is the market price, but until you interview, I mean, not as many as you would to replace a position that you already have, but that first go-around or second go-around, to interview 15 or 20 people to get a good sense of what the market is. The other thing is, something very basic, but I used an industry association to talk to peers about what they were doing and where the market was. For us, in paying people and establishing it, there's three things that we say, both to our clients and internally, of how you set salary. It's what the person is worth to you, it's what the person's worth to your competition or anybody on the street, and then it's what they think they're worth. And those are usually three very different things. And so you need to make sure that you understand one and two before you go ask them what they think they're worth. But usually when you have good dialogue, it works. It's kind of like, it's like any review. When you wait until the last day to ever talk about it,
Sure.
it creates more
It's
conflict.
an issue. It's
Yeah.
an issue. Alan?
And you talked about our computation for distributions. I'm not sure how that relates to,
Well, no, I mean, from the standpoint of the process by which you developed it. You said when you got to 2008, that kind of brought you where you are today.
Right.
So that process, what was that process like?
so we worked with a consultant and came up with a formula for ownership compensation. And it was interesting to me because I used to think, well, whatever we earn, we take out. And he came up with a whole different way of looking at it, and then I sifted through it for a while, and what I eventually came up with was every quarter we take out 20% of our operating profit, and that's what is distributed to owners based on their ownership share. So quarter after quarter, 20% of operating profit is handled that way. And then what that forces me to do is, in April, make a distribution for taxes for the previous year. And let's just call that number 50%. And that's the way I like to say it. And that way no one's caught off guard. One of the things that I worry about the most is having one of my partners in tax trouble, whether it's a brother or another shareholder. That's something that I can't abide by. And that can happen
Yes.
if they're not planning
Yes.
for the fact that there may be, I don't want there to be any sort of phantom income tax problem. So by doing this, at least, I'm not sending it right to the IRS, but I'm getting it to them right before April 15th. There should be no issue. We pay some penalties because we do it that way.
Yes.
But we've all sort of been more than willing to make that trade. And then there's 30%, left over, which is, whether if we have bank debt, if we've done an acquisition, we're able to pay that down. Otherwise, it's just free cash flow. There's always some free cash flow. It's just a question of what it is, but that's what allows us to build our business.
Pete, anything to add from the process that you guys had between your dad and getting it to you before the transaction took place? What did your process look like?
When I came into the business, I can talk when I came in. There's three owners. I was one of them, and I was gifted some stock from my grandfather. That's how I originally got ownership in the company. So kind of similar to a couple other people here, my dad and my uncle paid themselves the same salaries, and then they paid themselves based on profitability of the company at the end of the year. So when I came on, we started to develop basically so I was market driven. I was the first generation that was truly market driven. And then I started to earn bonuses based on my areas and bonuses based on kind of similar to what it is right now in the company. And we brought 4 other family members in behind me that were part of my generation. We followed the same process, and it worked really well. But just in terms of, I guess, ownership or the compensation program, they weren't owners in the company, but the compensation program looked very similar to what mine was. So.
Okay.